Hello all, welcome back. Organizing Higher. In today's video, I'm going to talk about how I'm using OneNote, Todoist, and GTD to help plan a stress-free holiday. So I'm going to talk about how I'm using the natural planning model that's talked about in the GTD book, and Todoist and OneNote to help support my planning for the holiday. So if you need a little bit of help planning a stress-free holiday, definitely keep watching. So GTD talks about the natural planning model, and it's essentially this idea that naturally we are planners and we do this actually pretty regularly. There are 5 steps to the natural planning model, and I'm going to talk about what those steps are and then tell you how I'm using Todoist and OneNote to support those steps. The very first step is to define essentially your purpose. So why are you doing the thing that you want to do? In my case, planning for a great Christmas for myself and my daughter for a couple of reasons. It's our first Christmas where it's just her and I definitely love Christmas. It's one of my favorite holidays, and I want to start traditions that she and I can have for years to come that she'll cherish from her childhood, and that I'll cherish the memories from her childhood as well. So that's definitely my purpose and my deciding factor in moving forward, and why I'm even putting the effort into planning for the holiday season. Now, if this was a larger project or something more formal, when it comes to the natural planning model, I might have actually written out my purpose. This might be like a purpose statement or a mission statement for an organization, but since it's just me, I just did it in my head. The next step in the model is outcome visioning. So in this step, you essentially want to project yourself into the future and see yourself with that completed project. So if we're having a great Christmas and I'm making great traditions for my daughter, what does that look like? So for myself, when I'm doing this, I just do it in my head again because it's just me, but I'm thinking, what do I see? What do I smell? What do I taste? What do I feel? So really just absorbing myself in all of my senses to get an idea of what it's like to actually have this thing that I want to do, this project, have this great Christmas. What is that going to be like? What will that actually feel and look and smell like when it's accomplished? The next step is brainstorming. A lot of times when people go through the natural planning model, sometimes they just skip directly to brainstorming. And so having those first 2 pieces of setting up your purpose and recognizing your vision can be really important because it helps guide the brainstorming process. So for brainstorming, I'm actually using OneNote for this task, and I used OneNote to create a mind map. Now, I know there are a lot of mind mapping software that's out there. I've used things like the Brain or MindMeister or Meister, depending on how you pronounce it. But I really like OneNote for the free form factor. The learning curve is also non-existent because you're literally just writing circles and lines and words. So I love using OneNote as opposed to paper for one somewhat minor reason that might seem small, but for me is actually huge. And that's because I can move things around on OneNote. If you've ever done a mind map on paper, you know that you are confined to the size of the paper, which for most paper that I've ever seen is a finite resource. With OneNote, in theory, your mind map could be as large as you want it to be. And then as you're writing out your ideas, if you kind of come up against an edge or something where you have to move over, you need a bit more space to write, you can select everything that you've written and just move it over. So having that flexibility is just so huge for me for this process, to not have to feel like I have to restrict my ideas to fit on the paper. So with my mind map, I just kept it pretty simple. If you've never done a mind map before, there's definitely lots of resources and videos about what a mind map is, but essentially I just thought of kind of the bigger areas, what kinds of things would I want to do on Christmas and Christmas morning. So this is opening the presents, opening stockings, having breakfast, having hot chocolate with breakfast. So I have these larger ideas, and then with those larger ideas, I need to break those down into smaller tasks. So if I'm talking about having breakfast, I need to figure out what we're even having for breakfast. Is that going to be a casserole? Do I have the recipe for that already? Do I need to look for a recipe? So having this kind of brainstorming session with myself really helps me to kind of start planning in a way the tasks that I need to do, and helps to get it all on paper, which helps lead to the next step, which is organizing. So having done the brainstorming session in OneNote makes the organizing step so much easier, and I'm using Todoist to organize all of my ideas that I came up with in OneNote. So to get started in Todoist, I just set up a project. I'm just calling this Christmas 2020. So there's two schools of thought about this. You could technically make each of these tasks, each of these larger tasks, opening presents, making breakfast, etc. You could make each of those projects if you really wanted to. I decided not to. I decided to leave them all in one major project and just use sections for the kind of sub-projects. Let me know in the comments below if you would do something a little bit different, if you would want to do the tasks as a project, or if you would want them to be sections, or maybe something different. So once I have the project set up in Todoist, then all I need to do is just move the tasks over from my mind map. So like I said, this makes it a lot faster. I essentially already have the tasks I need to do. In some instances, I do need to do a little bit more planning though, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, how I'm using OneNote to support this particular project in my planning process. The other great thing about this, at least I think it's great, is even as I was moving tasks over into Todoist, I was continuing to come up with more ideas of things I wanted to do. So I just added those things into Todoist. So the last step in the natural planning model is to identify next actions. So for each of these sub-projects, what's the very next thing that I need to do? In some instances, the next action is that I need to do a bit more planning. Maybe that's 10 or 15 minutes to kind of plan out a little bit more detail about that particular area. The other thing I did is for the project, I actually put in the project comments the link to the OneNote mind map. That stops me from having to go and search for this mind map. If I want to look at it again, I can just click the link from Todoist directly, which saves me a little bit of time. I don't have due dates. I talked about that in my other Todoist video. With few exceptions, I just need to do these things as soon as I can. There isn't necessarily a due date for these things. You could argue the 25th is a due date. Some of the things I have to do the day before. So if I'm going to do a make-ahead casserole, for example, I need to make that ahead of time. Not putting these false due dates in really relieves some of the pressure of feeling like I have to get something done by a certain day. Now, as you're planning and you're getting a better grip on some of the things that you have to do, you might realize that there are some real deadlines associated with some of these tasks, and then you can add in due dates as appropriate. In my weekly review process, I will be reviewing this project regularly, so it's unlikely that I'm going to forget something or miss a deadline. It's constantly going to be something that I'm reminded of every single week during that review process. I definitely want to make sure I don't leave everything to do the 24th or the 25th, so by reviewing this regularly helps me keep in perspective what I should be working on and what I can maybe put off until a little bit later. And then finally, as I am conducting some of these next actions, some of this requires some research. So if I want to make breakfast, for example, and I need a casserole recipe, I might need to look for a recipe. So I can use OneNote to capture all of those notes. I can save web pages, I can save links, and that makes it a lot easier to have one place where all of my notes are. Also with OneNote, I had used it personally before, and I already have a list of recipes, and so I was actually just looking at the recipes that I have, and I can link to other pages in OneNote without having to create a new page just for that link. So that's how I'm using Todoist, OneNote, and GTD to stay organized and stress-free as I'm planning for my wonderful holiday season. Let me know in the comments below what you're doing to help plan your season and keep it stress-free. If you found this content useful, please consider sharing it with someone else who may also find it useful. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.